The girl everybody couldn't stop talking about lived on Idera Street, off the noisy part of Lagos that smelled like fuel, dust, and roasted corn. Her name was Adorgo. People swore her face could stop a quarrel. Men slowed their cars just to glance at her. Even women, especially the married ones, would whisper and shake their heads when she passed. Adorgo never wore makeup. Her skin was the kind of smooth that made you stare longer than you should. Her eyes, calm, with a slight sadness in them, like someone who saw too much too early. She wasn't loud, didn't chase attention, and yet somehow, attention ran after her. She worked at a small tailoring shop owned by Madame Ibube, a widow with a strong voice and a heavier hand. Most times, Adorgo sat at the edge of the shop by the window, her sewing machine clacking away. Women brought their asoebi and begged her to be the one to handle their fabric. They said her touch was magic, that clothes stitched by her always fit the body and softened the heart. This was the very thing that started the problem. Ndiamaka, daughter of the richest man on that street, entered the shop one Thursday wearing a green jumpsuit too tight for comfort. Her eyes scanned the place like she was searching for something to insult. And when she saw Adorgo quietly stitching a red blouse, she laughed, one of those fake high-pitched laughs that grated the air. "So this is the Adorgo everyone is talking about?" she asked nobody in particular. "This small girl? With all this praise, I thought she would at least be 6 feet and glowing like fire." The other tailors in the shop paused. Madame Ibube looked up, ready to interfere, but Adorgo didn't flinch. She just kept sewing like the thread in her machine had more value than any insult. That annoyed Ndiamaka even more. Days passed, and things started to change. Adorgo's clothes began to disappear from the drying line behind the shop. One time, her purse was cut open. Another day, someone poured palm oil on her fabric. Still, she said nothing. She just cleaned, replaced, and kept sewing. The whispers grew louder in the neighborhood. Maybe she's using something. She's too quiet. Too perfect. I don't trust her beauty. It's not normal. And just like that, admiration turned to suspicion. On a Sunday morning, Adorgo walked to the shop to retrieve her forgotten measuring tape. She wasn't even inside the shop when it happened. 3 girls, Kamsi, Abun, and Tochi, rushed at her from behind the gate. They were classmates of Ndiamaka, girls with shiny phones and empty eyes. They held a yellow bucket. Cold water hit her face, soaking her white blouse, running down her legs, carrying shock and shame with it. "You think you're better than everyone?" Kamsi shouted. "You want to use beauty to steal husbands, ABI." Tochi added. People gathered, as Lagos people always do. Phones came out. Some laughed, others just watched, eating puff-puff and waiting for what would happen next. Adorgo didn't cry. She stood there, soaked, hair clinging to her face. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not with fear, not with shame, but with something colder. Something ancient. Then she turned around and walked away, slow and calm, like she wasn't walking through disgrace but through fire. That night, the rain came heavy. Madame Ibube heard a knock at the door and opened it to see Adorgo, still wearing the wet blouse from earlier. She stepped inside, eyes distant. "They think they've done something," Adorgo said quietly. "But what they don't know is that." She didn't finish the sentence. She just smiled. And in that smile, something shifted. Something that didn't belong in the mouth of a girl her age. Something older than the streetlights, louder than the gossip. And for the first time, Madame Ibube felt it. The air in the room had changed. That night, Lagos refused to sleep. Thunder clapped like angry footsteps from heaven, and rain fell as if the sky was in mourning. Madame Ibube sat across from Adorgo in her small living room, heart racing, fingers nervously plucking at the edge of her wrapper. The way Adorgo stared at the wall, like she was watching something only she could see, wasn't normal. "Adorgo," she finally said, voice low, "who are you?" Adorgo turned her face slowly, not blinking. I'm the same girl you took in. The one you said had hands like a blessing. Yes, Madame Ibube said. But what kind of blessing is this? You didn't shout. You didn't cry. They poured water on you like a dog. That smile you gave, it's still in my chest. I haven't breathed properly since. Adorgo didn't respond. Her eyes dropped to her lap where her fingers were tracing a rhythm on her skirt. Madame Ibube noticed it wasn't random. It looked like counting. Do you want to tell me something? She asked. Adorgo looked up again, that sad calmness still sitting in her face. They always start like this. First they praise, then they doubt, then they fear. Then they attack. Who? Madame Ibube whispered. People, Adorgo said simply. When they see what they don't understand. Lightning cracked again. The lights flickered. And that's when Madame Ibube noticed something. Adorgo wasn't wet anymore. She had come in soaked from the rain, but her clothes were dry now. Her hair wasn't dripping. Even her feet left no footprints on the tiled floor. She stood up suddenly, her wrapper almost falling. Stay here, she muttered, heading to her bedroom. Let me get you dry clothes. But when she returned, Adorgo was already in the kitchen, her hands gently rinsing okra as if nothing strange had happened. Like she hadn't just been humiliated in public. Like she hadn't walked in drenched but now looked untouched by water. Madame Ibube swallowed her fear and stayed silent. The next morning, Endiamaka woke up screaming. Her mother rushed into her room, eyes wide with panic. Endiamaka was sitting in her bed, eyes red, body shivering. There were voices, she cried. They kept whispering. Which voices? They were saying my name, like they were dragging it across metal. Her mother held her tightly. It was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. Because the next day, Kamsi collapsed in her classroom. Just fainted mid-laughter. Her friends said she had been acting strange all morning, scratching her arms like something was crawling beneath her skin. Doctors said there was nothing wrong with her. They sent her home. Then Tochi started screaming in her sleep. Then Abun refused to speak, just stared into space for hours. The parents whispered among themselves. Someone mentioned curses. Another said spiritual attack. But none of them dared say Adorgo's name. Only Endiamaka did. She stormed into the tailoring shop on Friday, eyes wild, wig askew, feet dragging like she hadn't slept in days. You, she pointed at Adorgo, who was calmly folding fabric. What did you do? The other women in the shop froze. Adorgo looked up, slowly, as if she'd been waiting. Why are you asking me? She said softly. Because it started after that day. Endiamaka shouted. After the water. My friends, every single one of them, are going mad. Madame Ibube stepped forward. You think you can come in here and make noise because of your father's money? I don't care about money. Endiamaka screamed. I want to know who this girl really is. Adorgo stood now, eyes steady. You want to know who I am? You already know. I'm the girl you poured water on. I'm the one your jealousy couldn't understand. The one you feared for no reason. She walked slowly toward Endiamaka, and for the first time, the proud girl took a step back. But let me ask you something, Adorgo continued. When you decided to shame me, what did you think would happen? That I'd break? That I'd cry? That I'd disappear? Silence. You didn't know I was sent here. That I didn't just come to Lagos to sew clothes. That I didn't just come to walk quietly and smile gently. The air shifted. The walls seemed to hum. Even Madame Ibube felt her throat tighten. Adorgo stopped right in front of Endiamaka, leaned in, and whispered, You poured water on beauty. But what you didn't know was that beauty is not the only thing I carry. And with that, she turned and went back to folding her fabric. Endiamaka fled the shop. That night, her mother took her to a pastor. They stayed at the church till morning. The pastor didn't sleep. Said he kept seeing a girl's face in every corner of the building. He didn't know her name, but when he described the face, Endiamarca fainted. Adorgo, on the other hand, spent the night quietly, her candlelight flickering on her table as she stitched a new dress. Blue lace, smooth edges, beautiful neckline. For someone nobody really knew, Adorgo didn't seem surprised by the way the city was reacting. She just kept sewing. Each stitch, a warning. Each pattern, a story. And the next morning, when Madame Abube walked in, she found a note on her table. It was from Adorgo. She read it once, then twice, and her hands began to shake. Because the letter didn't start with dear, and it didn't end with sincerely. It started with, "You brought me here," and ended with, "Now they'll know why." For the first time in 10 years, Madame Abube locked up her shop by noon. She clutched the letter from Adorgo like it would fly out of her hands if she breathed too hard. It wasn't just the words on the paper, it was the way they were written. Like the girl wasn't asking for permission anymore. Like she had crossed into something else. And now, everyone else would just have to catch up. Abube walked to her back room and sat heavily on the old wooden chair her late husband used to polish. She stared at the letter again. Not a single mistake. No scribble. No hesitation. Just a calm, sharp message from a girl who had always kept her head down. She read it again. "You brought me here. Now they'll know why." Her mouth felt dry. Not just because of the heat, but because something about the letter felt final. Meanwhile, across Idera Street, things were beginning to crack. Endiamarca hadn't gone home since the incident at the shop. She stayed in the church guest room, eyes darting at every sound. The confident girl who once shook her hips through the street like a queen now couldn't hold her spoon without spilling water on herself. Her phone rang, again and again. Her friends were messaging her non-stop. Kamsi still hasn't spoken since yesterday. Tochi keeps drawing circles on the wall. Abun tried to cut her own hair and said it was crawling. Endiamarca didn't reply. She just curled into the church couch and cried. Her mother came that evening with a priest from their village. The old man entered the room without greeting anyone, eyes sharp, lips moving even before he sat down. "Where is she?" he asked. "Who?" her mother asked. "The girl. The one you wronged." Endiamarca froze. "She didn't do anything," her mother snapped. The priest laughed. "She didn't have to." He brought out a small leather pouch from his wrapper and placed it on the floor. "You don't fight these kinds of spirits with noise," he said. "You beg them. You kneel. You admit your foolishness and hope it's not too late." Endiamarca's mother started sweating. "You mean this girl is a—" "She's not a spirit," the man said. "She's a reminder of something forgotten. Something older than the way you people now walk around with fake nails and twisted wigs." He turned to Endiamarca. "And you poured water on her." Endiamarca broke down again. But by then, it was already happening. All around the neighborhood, strange things were unfolding. That night, a woman shouted from her window that her mirror wouldn't reflect her face. At the corner where the food cellar usually stood, her pot of rice boiled with no fire beneath it. A baby that hadn't spoken before suddenly opened her mouth and called her mother by name, in a man's voice. The entire street started to buzz with fear. Neighbors whispered that something had been awakened. But nobody could say what. Except one person. Agbona, the gatekeeper at the compound beside Madame Abube's shop, who'd watched Adorgo for months without speaking a word to her. Everyone thought he was deaf because he rarely spoke. But Agbona wasn't deaf. He just listened more than he talked. He saw things most people ignored. That night, he told his wife something that made her fall to the floor. "I saw her," he said. "Who?" his wife asked, clutching her wrapper. "Adorgo. But not her. Her shadow." "What's wrong with her shadow?" "It wasn't following her. It was ahead of her. Like it was leading." His wife spat on the floor. Agbonna, you've started again. I know what I saw, he said, trembling. Meanwhile, Adorgo was nowhere to be found. Madame Ibube hadn't seen her since the letter. The shop was too quiet. The air felt heavy, but she didn't dare ask questions. She just waited and prayed. 3 days passed. On the fourth night, around 2 a.m., the sky above Idera Street lit up with a strange glow. Not lightning, not electricity. It was like a slow-burning fire, but cold. People came out of their houses. Children cried. Dogs howled. Even the air smelled different, like rain and something burnt. At the center of the street, standing right in front of the tailoring shop, was Adorgo. She wore a plain white gown. Her hair was down, resting on her shoulders, but the wind kept brushing it aside like it didn't want to hide her face. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Everyone came out. Even Ndiamaka. She had no shoes on, just a long t-shirt. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands trembled. She walked toward Adorgo, slowly, knees shaking with each step. She knelt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Adorgo looked at her, and for the first time since that day, she spoke with her whole voice. "Did you see now? That beauty is not a gift. It's a burden. A fire. Something that people love until they fear it." Ndiamaka cried, "Forgive me, please." Adorgo stepped closer. Her bare feet touched the wet ground. She bent down and touched Ndiamaka's head. "I'm not here to punish," she said. "I'm here to remind." "Remind who?" "Everyone. That you can't fight what you don't understand. And you can't destroy what was chosen." Then she turned and walked away. Into the darkness. No one followed. Not even Madame Ibube. By morning, her room was empty. Her clothes gone. Only one thing remained, her sewing machine. Still warm. Still humming. Like she had just finished one final stitch. The city tried to return to normal. Cars still honked. Bread still sold. Children still ran across puddles. But something in the air had shifted, like Lagos itself had witnessed a secret it wasn't supposed to see. People whispered less now. They moved slower past Idera Street. The same neighbors who once laughed at Adorgo's quietness now avoided the tailoring shop like it carried a sickness. But it wasn't sickness. It was memory. And fear. Madame Ibube never reopened. She came every morning, unlocked the shop, swept the floor, then sat behind the counter. Customers still came, but she turned most of them away. She'd say she wasn't feeling well, or that the generator was bad, or that she was waiting for fabric that never arrived. But really, she was waiting for Adorgo. She watched the door like a mother waiting for a child who said they'd only step out for 5 minutes. Days turned to weeks. Rain came and went. The machine on Adorgo's table stayed untouched, yet every morning it looked freshly cleaned. No dust. No cobwebs. Not even a fingerprint. One evening, a boy ran into the shop. His name was Ikenna, barely 12, always barefoot, always with torn shorts. He stopped right in front of the table and stared at the machine. "I saw her," he whispered. Madame Ibube looked up slowly. "Saw who?" "Adorgo," he said, pointing. "In my dream." She was standing beside the third mainland bridge. Her eyes were glowing. "Child, are you all right?" she asked, rising. "I'm not lying. She told me to give you this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of fabric, smooth, sky blue, stitched in gold thread with a single word. "I'm not far." Then he ran off. Ibube's legs nearly gave way. She sat back down, fabric clutched to her chest. A tear escaped her eye, not out of sadness, but relief. Somehow, she knew the boy wasn't lying. She didn't know how Adorgo did it, but then again, she never really knew who Adorgo was. Across town, in a quiet estate not far from Victoria Island, Ndiamaka wasn't eating. Her mother had tried everything. Herbal baths, prayers. Even taking her to a white garment church where the prophetess spoke in riddles and smoke. But the girl barely responded. She sat on the floor of her room most days, drawing patterns on the wall. Circles, spirals, stars. Then one day, she asked for thread. Not food, not clothes, just thread. Which color? Her mother asked carefully. Any, she said. And so they brought thread. Red, green, yellow, navy blue. She took them to the back room, locked the door, and for 6 hours, no one heard a sound. When the door opened, what they saw froze everyone. She had stitched a single long fabric from all the threads, weaving colors together like it had been planned for years. No one had taught her to sew. She didn't even know how to hold a needle properly last month. Now, she held that cloth like it was a flag. She came to me again, Endiamaka said, her voice soft, like someone waking from a dream. But this time, she didn't speak. Who? Her mother asked. A doggo. Her mother flinched. Why is she haunting you? She's not haunting me, Endiamaka said. She's showing me. Showing you what? But the girl had already closed her eyes, her fingers still moving gently across the cloth, like she was listening to a song no one else could hear. Back on Idera Street, things continued to shift. Tochi, Kamsi, and Abun had all left the city. Their parents said they needed space, but everybody knew they were running. Because each of them claimed they'd seen a doggo standing in their dreams. Not angry, not even sad, just watching. Only watching. Agbona, the gatekeeper, was the only one who spoke freely. She's not gone, he'd tell anyone who asked. People like her don't disappear. They wait. Wait for what? Someone once asked him. Agbona just smiled. For the rest of us to understand. That night, something strange happened. A woman named Awil, who had never liked a doggo, came knocking at the shop around midnight. She was drenched in sweat, breathing hard. Madam Ibube, she shouted. Please, open. Ibube, startled, came out in her night wrapper. What is it? What happened? I saw her, Awil said, tears running down her face. She was in my daughter's room. What? Not in a scary way. My daughter was crying. She's been sick for days. Doctors couldn't help. Then tonight, I saw a doggo, sitting by her bed. She was singing. A song I didn't understand. And now, my daughter is smiling. Madam Ibube looked into the woman's eyes and saw something unexpected. Gratitude. She touched her, Awil said. She didn't speak. Just sang. And then vanished. More stories followed. A boy who stammered his whole life suddenly spoke clearly after dreaming of her sewing in the clouds. A girl who lost her ability to walk after a car accident stood again after hearing a whisper in the dark. Stand. I will hold you. A doggo's name now carried weight. Not the weight of gossip, but of mystery. People no longer called her strange. They called her scent. Nobody could explain it. There were no rules. No warnings. She came to whoever she chose. Appeared in dreams. Healed the unseen. Restored what was broken. But never to brag. Never to speak of what she'd done. Never to return to be worshipped. Only to remind. And then one day, the machine in the shop turned on by itself. No one touched it. No power. No fuel. Yet the wheel turned, slow and steady. The needle moving like invisible hands were stitching something none of them could see. Madam Ibube walked over, tears falling freely now. She placed her hand on the machine and whispered, I kept it safe. The hum grew louder. Not noise, but purpose. Because the doggo wasn't gone. She had only stepped into the part of the story where her face wasn't needed, but her work continued. And across Lagos, from island to mainland, from mansions to markets, hearts began to change. People remembered what it meant to see without judging, to admire without destroying, to respect beauty, not punish it. And somewhere far, where sky kissed water and silence ruled, a doggo stood barefoot, watching the world. She smiled, then turned, and walked forward. Because her story was never about revenge. It was always about becoming the echo that heals what envy once tried to break. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.